Oh, testing. I was saying, okay, finally, we are into the final part of our chapter 22 video. Okay, now, first of all, I must apologize because my microphone, for whatever reason, is broken down, right? So I may sound a little bit off here for this video, but let's just put up with it. Okay, now here, for this video, we are going to tackle the hardest part in our chapter 22, in which we are going to look at none other than fiscal and monetary policies themselves, right? Now, first, okay, now, 兩 part我哋要注意嘅。First part will be about the objectives of our policies, because in examination, sometimes you will be asked to evaluate a certain policies, right? Now, when you need to evaluate that, you need to follow the guideline set up by EAA. Basically, they say there are 4 objectives, and most of the time, 4 conflicting objectives that you need to pay attention to. Okay, now the 4 objectives are here. First, ensure long-term economic growth, which translate into would be the YF. Okay, the long-run output level. YF 啦。Now, obviously, second and third, we would be talking about price level and employment level or output level, right? Basically, stabilizing price level and improving employment, right? Or sometimes making employment worse. Sometimes there will be trade-off. Now, these 3 are nothing new to you for our ADAS. Now, but the new thing will actually be number 4 here. Okay, the closing the so-called income gap. 原來仲有一個 objective 有機會要令貧富懸殊收窄佢啊。Okay, sometimes it happens. All right, so remember all these 4. You must remember all these 4, because when it comes to the evaluation questions, you need to use these 4 as a guideline for you to blow some economic water, so to speak, 係嘛？你吹水都要攞翻 econ 嘅 point 嚟吹咯，好嘛？嗱 let's look at some examples of evaluation questions, okay? And that would be here. Let's go to page 19, 係嘛？我哋第19版望一望 page 19. The first short questions here, okay? Question 2013. Question 8 of section 8. Here it says, suppose a government is facing a budget deficit. Now remember, what is a budget deficit? Basically, it's spending too much money. Okay, spending too much money, not enough taxation, not enough revenue, right? 係咪啊？G 大個 T 啦。Now here, some politicians have proposed that the government should raise the income tax rate. 佢話啦，應該要加下稅喎，係咪？ To reduce the budget deficit. Now we need to evaluate that proposal. Okay. Now, when you see the word evaluate, now remember the easiest way to evaluate would be immediately recite the 4 objectives here. Okay, remember the 4 objectives. Number 1 would be about long-term growth. Okay, number 2, we talk about price level, stabilizing price level. Number 3 would be the employment level, and number 4 would be our income gap. Now, sometimes there will be other useful points as well. For example, whether it is effective or not. Can it achieve the goal stated in the questions, right? Now, but let's stick with our standard, the so-called standard structure first, using these 4 points. Now, let's do some brainstorming. Remember, when income tax rate, let's say, goes up, 好啊，收貴咗啦. Basically, income tax rate goes up. Now, there will be 2 things happening. First thing, the so-called disposable income would go down. Therefore, AD would go down. 係嘛？首先記得呢個啦 ，AD would go down. Okay. Now, second, remember, since income tax rate goes up, there would also be possibly these incentive effects, meaning our SRAS or sometimes even LRAS may go down. So both of these are possible. So when we talk about the first one, long-term growth, it may be a negative thing because of these incentive effects. Because this incentive, it may be negative because then you explain. In terms of long-term growth, it may be unfavorable because these incentive effects may affect long-run incentive to production. Now, therefore, our YF would go down, potential output level would go down, something like that. So, first one, not favorable. Now, what about second one? Yes, the impact on price level. When AD goes down, we know price level would go down. So, it may be a positive thing because we then, as consumer, will have more purchasing power. More purchasing power, it may mean that we have more purchasing power in the long run. 係嘛？我哋物價水平低咗 ，purchasing power 有機會高咗，係嘛？ It may be the case, may be the case. Of course, assuming income constant, we are talking about. 係咪啊？ Now here, I would say this point is rather weak. 係嘛？ When we talk about purchasing power, now only use this point when you absolutely have none other point to use. Because remember, our Y also decrease the real income, 係嘛？好似有少少衝突啦，係嘛？ So this is a rather weak point, so to speak. Only use it when you have absolutely nothing to use. 好嘛？ Now, I think the easy one to use is actually employment here. Obviously, AD goes down. SRAS also goes down. It means that our output level would go down. When the output level goes down, what does that mean? It means that there is no such need for that many factors. Therefore, most likely, unemployment would go up. We would have a negative impact, right? Negative impact here. Now, finally, for income gap. Now remember, income tax is progressive in nature. Now, since we have more progressive tax, that would mean the gap would become narrower, which would be a good thing. So, you see, using these 4 points, or in this question, let's say 3 points, 1, 3, 4, you already can answer quite a lot of things, okay? Some negative, one positive, right? In fact, this is already quite enough for your discussion. Okay, so 係嘛？唔使自己諗咁多嘢嘅。No need to think about what to answer when you have these 4 objectives in mind. You can immediately throw out these 4 objectives to do your evaluation. 係嘛？ Okay, now let's say you are very creative. You are thinking about, hey, they say they want to achieve this goal, right? To reduce the budget deficit. The question is, can it? 得唔得先？嗱，其實可以討論呢個問題喎。You can also try to argue in this point. Now, if you are very creative, you would think that increasing income tax rate, okay, 係嘛？ Now, since we talk about employment would drop, right? So there will be more unemployment. Now, when we have more unemployment, what does that mean? It means that the tax base would go down. Tax base goes down, it may mean our tax revenue would also go down. So ultimately, it may not make an increase in our budget. It may even make it worse. 即係咩意思啊 ？Each person who is still under the tax system, they will be paying more tax, but then we will have fewer people paying tax. 俾稅嘅人會少，係要俾稅嘅人俾多咗稅，但係會少咗人俾稅嘅，咁嘅意思啦。So is it effective? May not be effective to begin with. Alright, so you see here we have 4 marks. You pull out any 2 points would be good enough. 是但講2個得㗎啦。But for our purpose, when you revise, right? Remember all these points, 係嘛？記晒所去啦。All these points would be very useful. 好唔好啊？ Alright, so this is the way we do it. Okay, now why not look at one more example? One more example. Okay, 好嘛？嗱 ，we just look at the question. 嗱，唔好做住，有啲嘢未必識嘅。After we look at the question, we then will go back into our previous pages. Okay, now it says in an attempt to reduce 又係啦，係咪啊 ？Reduce fiscal deficit again. Try to increase tax on one hand and decrease fiscal spending on the other hand. Basically, G decreases, T increases. And then look at the question. Now we have to discuss one advantage, one disadvantage to this alternative policy. Basically, evaluate another policy. And part A, evaluate this policy with 2 possible bad effects. 今次啦，唔係正反論證啦，係反反論證。Okay? 得唔得？ Okay, now let's do it after we are done with the first page. Okay? Now let's go back to our first page. Page 15. 我哋翻返第15版啦，好嘛 ？Page 15. Now here, you already see how these 4 objectives work together to answer the evaluation questions, right? Now, let's look at some examples of fiscal policy and monetary policy. 好嘛？嗱，首先啦 ，first thing to remember, when we talk about monetary policy, how it works, it always works like this, by changing money supply. Okay, now let's assume goes up. Of course, it can go another way. Okay, 佢可以倒轉嚟行㗎。It can go another way, right? Interest rate go down. Interest rate goes down. The cost of borrowing goes down. Now, therefore, C and I goes up, and AD would go up. Now, this is the major force. Major force. Remember, monetary policy mainly achieve its goal through AD. 係嘛 ？AS 好少嘅，有 it is possible it may affect AS because I increases may mean more factor, but major force is AD. 好嘛 ？Unless the question specify, you just need to focus on AD. 好嘛？除非題目講明會令 AS 升咗，如果唔係主要係 AD 嘅。Okay, now when AD changes. First of all, if you remember, if we just change AD, would it affect YF? No. Therefore, it cannot achieve goal number 1. Most of the time, it would achieve 2 and 3 here. Okay? Most of the time, it will achieve 2 and 3. Okay? Of course, with a side effect later on, you will see side effect. Number 4 would also be affected. 一陣間講點嘅 side effect 嘅話，嗱，but then you see the main point is that here usually there would be no major effects on long-term economic growth. OK 得唔得？嗱，主要都係影響緊2、3、4嘅，2、3特別係 OK 好唔好啊？嗱 ，so this is monetary policy. All of them works like this: changing money supply. Changing interest rate, therefore AD changes. Now, for the actual, let's say the actual operation, go back to our chapter, and I think it's 19 or 20, right? I don't remember which chapter, the video. We talk about monetary policies in that chapter in quite some details. 咁啊，嗱，唔好嘥時間我哋呢度。嗱 let's then go to the fiscal policy. Now, when we talk about fiscal policy, we are talking about policies by manipulating the so-called G and T and or 係嘛？可能收多咗稅，收少咗稅 or spending more money 係嘛？ So both of it, G and T by manipulating. Now here, let's talk about them one by one. Okay. Now first of all, by manipulating direct tax, 係嘛？ Direct tax. Let's imagine we are dropping the direct tax. So what objectives would be affected here? Actually, now first of all, direct tax would affect AD in the sense that you have more disposable income. 係嘛? Now, when we affect AD, we know the objectives will be number 2, number 3, and with the side effect of number 4, as always, right? But then, the important thing is direct tax also would affect AS, short run and or long run, depending on the question, right? Because of incentive to work. Now, when we move LRAS, 我哋而家鬥到 LRAS， 咁即係咩意思啊？ So most likely, number 1 would also be an objective achieved by direct tax. Okay, 好嘛？ Now, as opposed， 呢個擺埋一齊有原因嘅。Now, as opposed to indirect tax， 嗱 indirect tax 就唔同咯。Indirect tax, let's say we drop indirect tax. The only effect would be on SRAS. AD would not change. LRAS would not change. Because if you remember, indirect tax, this is hitting on their production cost. Only. 淨係搞嘅 production cost 啊嘛，唔搞其他嘢㗎，好嘛？ Alright, so here, think about it. The objective achieved when LRAS does not change. Number 1 would not be affected. So mostly 2, 3, and again, usually side effects, you will have number 4. 好嘛？ Now, there is another special a special case. What about if the government provides subsidy for business? Now, I specify is business, right? Now, because obviously, subsidy, first of all, it would affect SRAS. Obviously, right? Because the production cost will go down. Now, but then, if we are giving subsidy for business for them to open up shops, 鼓勵中小企, let's say, encourage SME to open up more shops, do more production, right? When you have more production, what does that mean? It means LRAS may also go up. Also, if we encourage you to do investment, okay, a subsidy for investment, AD may also go up. Now, therefore, I think you know, right? We are talking about 1, 2, 3, and sometimes 4, 2. So you see, right? Basically, number 4 is an objective that would be touched upon as a side effect. Only number 1 objective, sometimes it doesn't change. Okay, hold on. So transfer payment cash scheme, right? Mostly they move AD, not SRAS and LRAS. So we have 2, 3, and obviously, now this time I would say transfer payment and cash scheme. This time the major effects. 其實今次主要俾錢嘅原因，好多時候主要啊係個 income gap. The major reason, for example, why give money why give transfer payment to begin with? We want to help the poor, right? So this time, not quite a side effect. Now, spending on infrastructure. Now, obviously, when we do infrastructure, I would increase, AD increases, right? Now, but remember, when we talk about infrastructure, most likely LRAS would also be pushed up, which would also mean, right? Which would also mean short run AS would eventually be pushed up. Now, when you see LRAS, then we talk about 1, 2, 3. This time, as a side effect, number 4 would also be affected. After our ADAS chapter, now this time we have only added into our table these 4 objectives, which themselves are not exactly that difficult. 其實都唔係咁難啫嘛，係嘛？ Now here, finally, spending on education and R&D. Again, AD goes up. Education, R&D, our factors may go up. Now, which may also mean SRAS eventually would go up. Now this time, same, 1, 2, 3, and side effects, number 4. So basically, every policies would touch on 1, 2, 3. Number 2, 3, 4. No, number 1 is kind of a unique objective, right? Because not all policies would touch on number 1. So this is a very quick go through of the policies or common policies you may see in examination. But again, talking like this is meaningless without looking at the question. So let's not waste time and go directly into the a lot of questions I put into this note. OK， 好嘛？我哋要睇大量嘅 example 嚟到去理解啦。好嘛？嗱 ，let's do it in a chronological order， 係咪？順住做啦。好，嚟啦噃。嗱 ，first question here, 2013. Initially, at full employment equilibrium and government full employment originally 位置升係咪？ And government expenditure equals to tax revenue. Now, what do we call this? We call this fiscal balance. Originally, and a fiscal balance. Right? Now, which of the following would result in a coexistence of a deflationary gap and a budget deficit? Now, we needed both to have a deflationary gap and budget deficit starting from this original position, right? So let's see. A, reduction in tax. Now when we say reduction in tax, 好啦，嗱，而家收少咗稅喎。When tax decreases, what happens? Usually it means our disposable income will go up. If we talk about income tax, so to speak, 係嘛？因為16年之前啊 remember, in lesson, I talked about before 2016, this question. EAA wasn't quite aware of the differences between direct tax and indirect tax. So here, let's make our life simple. Okay, let's make our life simpler. This is an income tax. 簡單啲啦. So, tax revenue drop, YD goes up. Therefore, AD would go up. Also, this incentive, if you remember, incentive effect, SRAS may also go up. Here, since AD and AS go up, Y would go up. When Y goes up, what happens? There should be an inflationary gap. 其實應該出現呢個 IG 喎 inflationary gap, not quite a deflationary gap, right? So unfortunately, A is wrong. A 就啱啦變咗 A is wrong, okay? Because this is not quite a deflationary gap, but inflationary gap here. 好嘛？好嗱，第二個啦。 Now, reduction in money supply. Remember, when money supply reduces, interest rate increases. Now, therefore, AD would goes down. AD goes down. Y goes down. So, this is a deflationary gap. Okay, 好嗎 deflationary gap. Now remember why 係咪？我哋之前講啦 ，y decreases. It also means what does that mean? It also means employment most likely to go down. When employment goes down, 而家冇人做嘢喎 ，then our direct tax revenue would also go down. 少咗人做嘢咪少咗人交稅咯。Okay, so it would also make a deficit. 係咪啊 ？B is the answer that we want. Okay, 係咪？咁咪 deficit 咯，好嘛？ Now C, reduction in government expenditure. Same, right? G decreases, therefore AD decreases. AD decreases, Y decreases. Now this is a deflationary gap. 嗱呢個啱嘅 ，but since we were talking about originally G equals to T, now if G goes down, then it would become G greater than T. This is not a deficit. No. Here, 搞錯咗。G smaller than T, then this will not be a deficit. This will be a surplus. So doesn't quite hit this point, 係嘛？ But unfortunately, this will make it a surplus. Okay, not quite the point we want, 係嘛？ Or even if you go deeper, it may not even be a surplus because we just talked about, right? Direct tax revenue will also go down. Eventually, T would also go down. So who would go down faster? How do I know? 我點知邊個跌得多啲啊？ So at best, this is a big question mark. 好嘛 ？C is a big question mark here. Now what about D? A reduction in the desire to import. 如果 import 少咗啲咩意思啊 ？import 少咗 NX goes up, AD goes up, AD goes up, Y goes up. This is an inflationary gap. So not correct. 死咗啦，係嘛 ？So answer would be B in this question. 好嘛 ？Alright, now so you see, when it comes to this chapter, usually they will ask two things together. 係嘛？通常問兩樣嘢嘅 ，gap with a budget, or later on you will know gap with a trade deficit or a trade surplus, or third, budget and trade. 通常呢三樣嘢是但揾兩樣嘢問你嘅 ，OK？ Don't worry, we will see more and more of this kind of question. 好嘛？嗱 ，in an economy with severe inflation and income inequality, the government can lower price level and reduce income gap. You need to achieve two things together: lower price level, reduce income gap by, let's say, first, increase environmental tax. Remember, environmental tax. What kind of tax is that? Remember, this would be a regressive tax. In previous videos, we talked about this being a regressive tax. Now regressive tax increases. So what happened? It should make our income gap wider. So unfortunately, it does not reduce income gap. It's just the opposite. 唔可以加呢個稅啦，好冇？嗱 ，next, increase salary tax and its progressivity. Now here, obviously, progressive tax goes up. Therefore, it becomes narrower, the gap. Now also, since salary tax increases, what does that mean? It means that our YD, disposable income, goes down. AD goes down. AD goes down. Price level also goes down. 係咪？咦，中晒 B is the answer. 又係 B 喎，咁啱係嘛 ？OK 嗱 ，let's see C and D. C reduce spending on social welfare. Okay, now remember social welfare. If you reduce it, okay, social welfare reduce it, then it only make the poor people suffer because usually the poor people will get social welfare, so it become wider the gap. Doesn't help. And D, reduce personal allowance. Okay, 嗱佢話如果 reduce personal allowance, basically is the opposite of D, 係嘛 ？Of B. 所以 B 啱咧 ，D 就錯啦。Basically is the opposite of what you're doing in B. OK 好嘛？所以 B 啱 D 就錯噶啦。Alright, so next question, 2016. When you see this year, trouble, right? 係嘛？嚟啦噃 ，Government build new infrastructure, 係咪 ？So let's see which one would be increased, right? During the construction period, employed population, obviously, right? Because you need to build infrastructure, you need to hire people. Yes, correct. You need to hire people to go make it. 係咪 ？Price level during the construction period. Now, this is also correct because remember, infrastructure. I increases, AD increases, AD increases, price level increases. So, yes, 1, 2 correct. Now, what about 3? Potential output 嗱，記住啦，咩叫 potential output 啊 ？This guy is YF. Remember, infrastructure push up LRAS. Therefore, YF also goes up. 1, 2, 3，三座係嘛 ？Price level after construction is completed. Now this one actually we need a big question mark here. 嗱點解要 big question mark 啊 ？On one hand, we know that infrastructure investment has increased, right? So AD has gone up, but at the same time, LRAS has also gone up. 喂，兩個都升晒喎，咁即係咩意思啊 ？Remember, right? This guy price level goes up. This one price level goes down. So up or down, we don't know. 唔知啊，唔知升定跌啊 ？I don't know. Depending on that shift, right? I don't know. So number 4 is a big question mark. Okay, 好嘛？ How do I know whether increase or not? 好嘛 ？So 1, 2, 3 would be increased. 係嘛？啱啦，1, 2, 3啱啦。Alright, now this one we have talked about in previous video. So let's go to the next one. I think it would also be 2016. Well, actually, there are a lot of 2016 questions. 原來好多添啊都係咪 ？So let's see here. Now, suppose country A initially at full employment and fiscal budget is balanced. 係咪？又係啦。G equals to T, and we are at YF. 好啦，嗱 in short run, remember 啊 ，short run 佢而家講 short run 啊。Economic recovery of trading partner. What does that mean? Trading partner recovery. It means that our export would go up. Meaning NX net export go up. Net export go up. Therefore, AD go up. AD goes up. What does that mean? It means price level goes up. Y also goes up. Now, when Y goes up, what does that mean? Y goes up. It means first we will have an inflationary gap. Now remember, I here Y also means employment would go up. Y 升即係咩意思啊 ？Employment 好咗咯。With more employment, our tax revenue from direct tax 多咗人翻工咪多咗人俾稅咯 ，would also go up. That would make the government have a surplus. So A would be the answer that we want. 好嘛？嗱，見唔見啊 ？First few times we tried it in the previous page, right? It can be a little bit daunting, a little bit difficult, but then as we do more and more, it's actually not as crazy as it sounds， 係咪？冇想象中咁恐怖㗎，係咪？好啦，嗱 ，let's do the next question here. Now, under which of the following situation may a fiscal deficit? Now, originally, this is G bigger than T and trade deficit. Now, let's say what is trade deficit. In simple terms, trade deficit means NX is a negative number. 咁啊，貿易逆差咯 ，OK deficit， OK be eliminated. Now our goal is to make it equal and no longer negative. 好嘛 ？So let's see how we can do. Now number one, let me write here. Number one, decrease in nominal interest rate. Okay, when interest rate decreases, remember we say AD goes up. 係咪 ？AD 會升咯 ，AD goes up. Now therefore, Y would go up. 係嘛 ？Y 會升咗喎 ，Y go up, meaning our taxation would go up. Yes, it can eliminate fiscal deficit. What about the other hand? 嗱，記住啦 ，what does Y goes up mean? It means the economy is doing better. The local economy. 好啦，我個經濟好咗 ，then would I buy more or buy less of the other economy's good? 我會買多咗人哋嘢定買少咗人哋嘅嘢 ？Obviously, I would buy more of other people's things, right? Since I am more richer, demand for foreign goods would go up. 係咪？而家我對人哋嘅 demand 會高咗啦。Therefore, our NX would actually further go down. 仲入口多咗啊。Okay, because I'm rich, so I buy more. I would import more. NX would go down. So unfortunately, number one is wrong. 2 and 3 would be the answer. OK 嗱，望啦，2同3發生咩事啦 ？Number 2, depreciate 嗱，記住啦 ，shortcut. We mentioned again and again and again. Shortcut. Local depreciate. Then NX goes up. 嗱，中咗啦 ，NX goes up 啊，中係咪啊 ？AD goes up, therefore Y goes up. When Y goes up, immediately tax revenue goes up. Yes, this is correct. 中啊，係嘛？因為記住啦，嗱呢個我唔解啦，我唔再解啦，好嘛 ？But I think I've talked about it quite a lot of times already, right? Now, so the shortcut, local depreciate, NX goes up. NX goes up, it means AD and Y will go up. Y go up, meaning T tax revenue would also go up. 好嘛？嗱呢個啦，好第三個啦 ，increase in income tax。喂，係咪？望下就知啦。嗱 ，first of all, income tax increase， 係咪？佢話 increase 啊 ，then tax increase，no need to say too much， 係嘛 ？So eliminated the so-called fiscal deficit. Now tax increase, disposable income decreases, so Y would go down， 係嘛？ And think about it. Y goes down, meaning your economy is not doing good. So the demand for foreign goods would go down. 我咪唔想買咁多人哋嘅嘢咯，冇錢啦而家。I'm poor. I don't want to buy that many things from the others. Which means NX would go up because I am buying less. I'm importing less. 我冇 import 咁多嘢入嚟啊嘛。係嘛？咁我咪解決咗咯，係咪？ So the deficit will be eliminated. Number 3 is also correct for this reason. Okay, 好嘛 ？So let me take a break first, and then I will come back very soon. Okay, my break is done. Now let's move on to the next question. When we talk about 2017, question 38 here. Okay, now here, look at it. Now, this question is a very easy question, but the packaging make it so difficult. 係個包裝睇落好似好難啊。嗱 ，to reduce again fiscal deficit 題都係㗎啦 fiscal deficit 㗎啦 ，may adopt either contractionary fiscal policy or expansionary monetary policies. Okay， 嗱我特登唔解係嘛？嗱 refer to a situation in an upward sloping short run， 佢講明 short run 嚟㗎。Okay， short run. Now, which of the following is an advantage of using expansionary over contractionary? Okay. Now, let me say this is a very, very stupid question. If you understand what is an expansionary and contractionary. Okay. So, let me ask you, what is an expansionary policy? If you remember, expansionary means Y would go up versus contractionary, Y would go down. Y did Y升咯 Okay, so using expansionary, employment level will be higher. Of course, Y 升啊嘛，你睇咁多嘢做咩啊 Why are you looking at so many things? Right? Why? Now, second, expansionary monetary policy. What does that mean? Actually, no. Skip number 2. Number 3 first. Real output level will be higher. Y 升啊嘛，梗係大過 Y 跌啦，白痴。1 and 3, correct, right? Now, what about number 2? 嗱，所以你見到其實好白痴條。1 and 3, as long as you understand what is expansionary and contractionary, you can already do it 好白痴嘅條嘛。嗱 ，number 2, what happens to purchasing power? Now remember, expansionary monetary policy. It means here, AD goes up, price level goes up. Contractionary fiscal policy, AD goes down, price level goes down. So what happens when price level goes up? It means that our purchasing power should drop. 啲嘢越貴，其實你啲錢越渣㗎。Okay, your purchasing power should drop. So unfortunately, number 2 is not correct. 1 and 3 are correct. 1 and 3, you just need to know what is expansionary and contractionary. So sometimes, boys, don't think too much. 唔使諗咁多㗎，你只要定義咪得。Expansionary, contractionary, 1 and 3搞掂，係嘛？ So it's just that easy. Okay. Number 2, something to do with price level. Price level. 好嘛？ All right. Now, let's keep going. Well, this is a very long video, and unfortunately, we can't get any shorter than that because we still have a long way to go. 頂住啊，仲有排去到26版要，好嘛？ Now here, the diagram below shows the aggregated. So basically, here we have what do we call this? A deflationary gap, right? Because deflationary, right? Because Y is here, YF is here. We have a deflationary gap here. Now, here, originally, import equals to export. So NX is 0 originally. NX is 0, right? Now, the government decreases social security, 係嘛？佢而家啦冇咁多生果金啊。So what happens here? Here is that our YD goes down. YD goes down. AD goes further down. So Y would go further down. Y 再跌喎。So meaning here, the new AD will look something like this. So what happened to the deflationary gap? It actually becomes wider. 係咪啊？所以A 同 C 錯啦。It will be wider. Now, what about the trade things? Now, remember, Y decreases. It means your economy is not doing good, right? So, our import would decrease. 唔買咁多嘢啦。So, NX would go up. Originally 0, now go up. Therefore, there will be a trade surplus. 買少咗人哋嘢啊，係嘛？買少咗人哋嘅。Now I'm buying less from the others, meaning my NX will go up. 好嘛？所以啦 ，NX 上升 ，trade surplus. Okay, so this is it. 係咪做咗發覺唔係好難啊？開始捉到路啦。Now, suppose a deflationary gap and fiscal deficit 又係 deflationary gap 啦 ，fiscal deficit. Which one following can narrow the gap and reduce deficit at the same time？ 係咪？又要做呢樣嘢啦。First, increase government spending on infrastructure。嗱，呢度即刻死咗，你即刻見到係咪啊？嗱 ，increase government expenditure, right? It means government expenditure 要使多咗錢喎，係嘛？嗱 ，this is not the CIGNX. We are talking about government expenditure goes up. I already have a deficit. 我頭先已經有 deficit 啦。Now I even spend more 啊！我仲使多咗。The deficit would actually goes up, right? The deficit would actually goes up. Now A is incorrect. 死咗啦呢度，死咗啦。OK， 好嘛？ Now what about B? Reducing profit tax rate. Reducing profit tax rate. Now let's see what goes on with profit tax rate. Now if we reduce profit tax rate, then our disposable income would go up. AD would go up. Y would go up. 係嘛 ？Y 會升咗啊，係嘛 ？Y would go up. Now therefore, it would close the deflationary gap. Now unfortunately, on another hand, 係嘛 ？Profit tax rate 啊 ，remember this is a direct tax. A direct tax. 而家啦，我哋係扣咗 direct tax 啊。Now therefore, what it means, although the tax rate may seem decrease, what happens is that our incentive would goes up. So Y would go up. When Y goes up, more employment. What does that mean? The tax base would go up. So look at here. One decrease, one increase. Does that increase or decrease? Unfortunately, we do not know. So B is not the answer we want because uncertain, right? Uncertain. Now, C, increase the tax rebate on salary tax. Basically, B and C are exactly the same. 係咪？一個扣 profit tax， 一個扣 salary tax 嘛 ，basically the same, right? Now what about D? Allowing more tourists to travel to the country visa free. Basically, attract more tourists into our country, right? Now what does that mean? It means NX would go up. Therefore, AD and Y go up. Yes, close the gap. Now we are having more people coming. So Hong Kong economy will become better. 好啦 ，Y 升咗啦。So remember, our tax base would also go up because we have more people working. Therefore, we would be receiving more tax. 記唔記得 ？Here, so close the gap, get more tax. 係咪 ？Close the gap, get more tax. No more deficit. So D would be the answer we want. 係咪？咪 D 咯，因為我哋又收多咗稅 ，Y 又高咗啊嘛。That would be D. Okay, now this one is a little bit difficult. Now I know a little bit difficult, but again, after you practice more and more, it shouldn't be too difficult for you. 好嘛，好啦，下一條啦。Now question 2019, quite recent 係咪？19年啊放到。Here, suppose an inflationary gap. Now this time inflationary and fiscal surplus 倒轉嚟諗住係咪啊？ Now which one would narrow inflationary and attain a balance 嗱，即係同頭先倒轉啦 ，just the opposite 係嘛 ？Just the opposite of the questions that we have done. This time we are closing inflationary gap and making the fiscal surplus no longer surplus, right? So let's see. First, reducing quota for inbound tourists. Now, reducing quota means tourists would go down. and X would go down. Therefore, Y would go down. Y goes down, meaning inflationary gap will be closed. When Y goes down, our tax base also goes down. Therefore, you won't be earning that much money again. So actually, A is the answer already. 咦，中咗咯已經，係嘛？嗱 let's see B, C, D， 好嘛？嗱 increase income tax rate。嗱 this one， I don't explain again. This one basically refer to the last question I talked about, right? So not the thing we want. Now, adopting a universal retirement protection scheme for all elderly aged 65 or above， 係嘛？呢個啦，整個全民退休保障啦，係嘛？全民退休保障啦。Okay, basically, this is spending more money. Spending more money. Therefore, yes, it makes balanced fiscal balance. 係咪啊？ But then remember, the thing is, now I shouldn't write G increase here. I should say at least the YD would increase. Therefore, AD goes up. AD goes up. Y goes up. Unfortunately, here, the gap, inflationary gap, would become even bigger. 會仲闊咗啊個 gap， 好嘛？個 gap 係仲闊咗。So unfortunately, not the answer. What about D? Increase government spending on infrastructure, right? 係咪啊？好啦 ，infrastructure 啦 ，you immediately remember, right? AD would go up as I goes up, so Y increases. 又係呢個位死啦。Okay? Now, you may be asking, what about LRAS? It also go up, right? It also go up. 係咪？ So either way 係咪？仲衰，如果 LRAS 再升嘅話 ，LRAS goes even further, meaning YF would go even further. Who is going faster? How do I know? So would the gap be closed? How do I know? Right? Big question mark. 好嘛，所以啦 A 啦。嗱 I think we have one final MC before we move on to the short questions and long questions. 好嘛，望望啦。嗱 2019 here, we have 3 policies, or should I say 3 bundles of policy. Now let's see which one is expansionary. Now make it expansionary. Again, expansionary, Y increases. Let's see which one makes our Y increase. Now first of all, open market purchase. Now remember, open market purchase means central bank purchasing bonds from public, meaning central bank pay money. Money supply increases. 好啦，如果你記得啦 it means AD goes up, so Y goes up. Yes, expansionary. Now what about a rise in discount rate? Now, whatever rates goes up, discount rate, right? Discount rate goes up, it means interest rate also go up. Interest rate goes up, it means AD goes down. So here, do you see conflict? So one is not correct. We do not know whether it is expansionary or contractionary. 唔知啊，唔知邊個勁啲啊 ？Okay, now second, purchase. 好啦，啱啱講咗啦 ，purchase. Y increases. Rise in salary tax allowance. When you say allowance increases, it means that YD, disposable income, goes up. So AD goes up, meaning Y goes up. So we have Y goes up, Y goes up. Yes, 2 is correct. So I think answer is B, right? So let's double check. Number 3. Rise in allowance. Here we know Y increases, discount rate, Y decreases. Then here, car crash 撞車係咪啊？唔知啦，唔知係咪升啦。So number 3 is not correct. Alright, only policy 2 being expansionary. Okay, so that will be the MCs for now. Okay, now first of all, Alright, again, we are moving on into short questions and long questions. But let me take a break first, okay? I'm coming back really soon. Okay, I'm back. 嚟啦，繼續啦。哇，好都講幾都唔完咁，好長啦。Okay, now let's go to page 20. Now this question, just now we have looked at it, but we have not done it. Now, after we briefly gone through all the policies, I think we are ready to do it. Okay, now let's do it. Now here, explain two possible undesirable effects of decreasing G and increasing T about policy to the US economy as a whole. Now, remember, if you want to do the undesirable effect, immediately again recite first the long-term growth, second the price level, third we talk about the employment, and fourth we talk about the income gap. Okay, I'm running out of ink. Wait for me a little bit. All right, new pen. Now here, immediately, we think of these four and see what would be the effect. Now let's brainstorm. Now, with G increase and T increases, what happens? We immediately think of AD would drop. 即刻諗到 AD 會跌啦，係咪啊？ AD would drop, meaning price level goes up, Y goes down. Now, there is another side effect. Assuming the tax we're talking about will be income tax, then there would also be these incentive effects. Meaning, our SRAS and LRAS may go down. 係咪？我哋啦都會諗到即刻咪 AS 會跌啦。Therefore, our YF, especially when we talk about LRAS, YF may also go down. Now, immediately, you see, there are many points we can talk about. For example, for long term, we can say because of these incentive effects, meaning LRAS may goes down. LRAS going down, that would mean YF, long-term growth, would be negative effects, negatively affected. OK， 呢個第一個啦，好，第二個 ，let's see AD 我呢度跌咗上嘅 ，so we see both of which price level goes down. Nothing to talk about. Nothing to talk about for price level. Now, what about employment situation? Now, since we are talking about AD going down, we know Y would go down. When Y goes down, what does that mean? This is not good for employment situation. Negative effects on employment. 好嗎? Okay, now, what about income gap? Income gap, let's give it. There is nothing to talk about in this case. Okay, at least nothing undesirable to talk about. 好嗎? Oh, now, what about B? An alternative policy is to finance fiscal deficit by printing money. Whenever we see printing money, 嗱我哋做少 brainstorm 好嘛？嗱 printing money means AD would go up. Therefore, price level goes up, Y would goes up. 係嘛？ Printing money. So, as opposed to our previous policy, we can instead print money. So, we need to discuss one advantage and one disadvantage of this alternative policy as opposed to here. Again, let's break it down into the 4 objectives. Okay, the 4 objectives. The first, our long-term growth. Second, price level. Third, employment. And finally, income gap. And this time, if you're creative, you can also go into number 5 when we talk about some practical concern. But let's stick with our standard framework first. Okay, here. Last time we say this incentive effect, it would make YF lower, right? Now this time, we only touches AD. We know YF would not be affected. Therefore, compare to the previous one, we know that YF would not have a negative effect. So that would be one advantage over the previous one. 係咪？呢個咪個好處咯 ，advantage. Okay, now second, what about, let's see. Yes, last time we talked about this as a negative. Now this time we are increasing our Y. Therefore, this is another positive effect. 係咪？ Another positive effect of using printing money. 好嘛？ Now, what about this? Price level and income gap. 嗱，今次望一望啦。Last time, the previous policy, price level would go down, which is good, right? Now this time, price level would go up. This is a bad thing because consumers would actually be punished. 係嘛？呢嘢貴咗，其實係懲罰緊消費者嘅啫。Because their purchasing power would go down. Therefore, this is a negative point that you can use. Now, immediately, my recommendation, recite the next one. Also related to price level. Remember, whenever price level increases or decreases, it would automatically have an effect on income gap as well. Why? Now think of it. When things becomes more expensive, it kind of like imposing a tax on both the rich and poor. 似唔似啊？似唔似係一次過要令到你俾稅啊？無論你有錢定冇錢，只要啲嘢貴咗，似唔似係你俾稅啊？罰你俾稅咯。It's kind of like a punishment tax. So we call this a so-called tax in kind. Okay, this is a tax in kind. Okay, now the effects would be the percentage drop in wealth for the poor. 冇錢人嘅 percentage drop would be bigger than the percentage drop in wealth for the rich people. Therefore, meaning the gap would be further widened, a negative point. So you see, in our analysis, our standard framework, 2 positive, 2 negative, pick any 2 to write. Of course, 1 positive, 1 negative. Now, what about the final point? 你話有咩可以咁實際咁講啦？ Okay, now here, this has to do with common sense. Remember, in the US economy, if you want to manipulate G&T, right, the fiscal policy requires approval. 係咪要審批㗎？係咪要喺國會啊 ？As opposed to monetary policy carried out by central bank, no need for approval. So monetary policy are actually way more responsive. Carry out faster. 你中意印就印㗎啦，唔使審批㗎，係嘛？ But fiscal policy requires the approval of the, I think, Senate, right? Something like that. 唔知叫國會定咩係嘛？ So this is a practical. This is a point that you can use from a practical perspective. This is a positive point. Okay? 好嘛？ So this is the way we do it. 好嘛？ All right, now almost done. Stay with me. We are almost done. 就快啦，就快得啦，捱多陣，好冇？ Now 2015 be section B, question 12. Now here again, discuss with for and against, right? Let's see what happens. The recent decline in gaming industry, 賭博業啊，賭博業, okay, gambling. This is basically gambling. We're talking about gambling. Result in drop in tax revenue, hence the government reduces spending on investment but keep the cash sharing scheme. Here it says reduce on investment dollar. Now, however, some economists suggest that the government should suspend the cash sharing scheme. So they say,喂，唔好派錢啊，派乜鬼錢啊? Allocate the sum to do investment instead. So we are having a situation, right? We are using investment versus cash scheme. 而家係派錢同埋投資嘅分別啦。Okay, we need to give one for and one against. Again, the easy way, our standard, 係咪又係我哋嘅 standard structure 啦。Think about long-term growth. Think about price level. Think about employment level. And think about income gap. Okay, come on. Think about all this. Now, I think obviously you would know when we talk about investment, right? Increasing investment, it means AD goes up and it means LRAS would also go up. Now, this is very important. LRAS going up is an important key here because if you want to go for investment, this is a very important point. Long-term growth speaking, investment would make sure YF would also go up. So this is a positive point that you can use for it because investment make sure long-term growth. Cash sharing, no. Remember, cash sharing only make AD increases, nothing else. Nothing else. All right, now what about price level? What about price level? Again, now since we are also making LRAS increase, therefore, price level in the long run may be the increase will be diluted. 係咪啊？冇升得咁嚴重啦。嗱 therefore, the purchasing power of people may also go up. Now this is another 4 points. Another point for it. Now, what about employment? Now, obviously, when you do investment, you are also making, right, the so-called LRAS and SRAS go up. So in the long run, the production capacity and the employment capacity will also go up. So another positive point, 係嘛？另一個好處啦。All right, so what will be the negative this time? In fact, the negative lies in income gap. Now think about it. A cash sharing scheme. A cash sharing scheme. What it does? Basically, it gives the same amount of money to the rich and the poor. A cash sharing can make sure the percentage increase in wealth. For the poor people, is bigger than the rich. Right? Now, if we do not do this anymore, then the income gap cannot be narrowed. 係嘛？而家你唔做呢樣嘢，本身派錢想幫邊個？幫冇錢人㗎嘛。Cash sharing scheme is aimed towards the poor people. Now we don't do that. Therefore, the income gap cannot be narrowed, or even you may argue it would be widened, something like that. Okay, so this is a negative point that you can use. Are these the only answers? No. You can still use other answers. For example, let me give you one creative answer, right? You can talk about the responsiveness. Because investment, is it immediate? No, it takes time. Versus cash is immediate. Now, therefore, if you do not give out cash now, but you do investment, people will still need to suffer in the short run. So in terms of short run, this is still a negative thing. 哇，等你等到天光啦，你投資我死咗啦，right? So if you don't give me cash now, I would die. So in terms of short run, whether it can solve the problem right now for the citizens, for the people, it's no good, no good. In short run, they pay the price. Okay, 好嘛? So you see, we do not need to think too much as long as you stick to these 4 objectives. 好嘛? 好，嗱，唔知頂唔頂得順啦，嗱，頂唔順都要繼續噶啦，因為呢個真係好長啦。Now, page 22. Now, this question, I think we have done it quite a lot of times, right? Now, let's see here. Point A. Do you remember which business cycle this is, right? This is a trough. Now, let's see. How may a reduction in interest rate help U.S. economy in 2009? Now, without using diagram, we need to use ADAS. Remember, very easy, right? Interest rate decreases. Cost of borrowing decreases. Therefore, C&I goes up. AD would go up. So Y would go up. Now, this is helping, right? Basically, helping it to rebound. 係咪？嗱，呢個唔講啦。Now, the important thing is actually with this part. This part is important. C and D, actually C, is the important question here. We need to discuss whether it is consistent with the answer that we have. The answer we have, lower the interest rate, better the economy, right? Let's see whether this is consistent or not. 好嘛？ We say, suppose interest rate decreases, the economy should become better, meaning unemployment rate should go down. 應該跌先啱㗎嘛？ But look at the graph here. Let's chop it up. Look at the graph here. Now, in fact, part C, you can answer in both yes or no, depending on which part you are looking at. For example, you can say it is not consistent by looking at 2007 to 2009. What happens? From the graph, you see interest rate is increasing, but at the same time, unemployment rate is increasing. 失業率升緊喎， which means the economy is not doing good. In fact, Y is kind of like decreasing. 係嘛？ Not doing good is not helping at all. 係嘛？冇咁抽象啦。Not helping at all. Therefore, it is inconsistent because in part B we say it will help, right? But it is not helping. Now, or you can answer, yes, it is consistent by looking at this part. 係嘛？ 2009 onwards, you see, after interest rate dropped, after interest rate dropped, you see what happens is that unemployment rates keep decreasing, meaning Y is increasing. So which is good, right? Also matches with previous one. Y is increasing, right? Growth rate, GDP growth rate, Y is increasing. We see that, right? 係咪？我哋見到啦 ，Y 係升緊喎。Now therefore, this is consistent. Now, which one you go on, depending on you. As long as you give me clear time frame， 你只要將個時間性寫得好清楚就得啦，好冇？ Now B suggest one policy that help increase the aggregate output in the long run。唔諗啦，自己 copy 啦。OK，copy from textbook，copy from notes， 唔嘥時間。All right, so remember this question. Spend some time because data response. You have to face data response in your DSE examination. Okay, and I suggest this is actually a good time to take a break. All right, so hopefully this is my last break. This is such a long chapter, but such an important chapter as you already seen from the past paper, right? So let's get started. 嗱，唔好嘥時間啦，仲有兩條啫。嗱。2018, let me say, this is very similar to the essay type questions that you will face in the final part of your data response question. And trust me, if it is an essay question in 2021, 2021年, this will be a 14-mark question. 14分㗎啦。So let's see what it has to say. Now this one, I'm not going to into the details with you. We just talk about some points and then we'll move on. 呢條暫時嚟講，我覺得大家需要練習多啲先得，係嘛？嗱 here, develop nuclear weapons and increase the military power. Country Z has raised the proportion of government spending from 10% to 20%. So basically, G, 10% to 20%. Okay, all males are also required to join the military force for 2 years. Now, in response to increasing military threats, the United Nations embargo most of the goods. Most of the goods. Now, so we have also have an embargo. Embargo meaning the NX would go down. The embargo 咁運啦，係嘛？ Now we have to analyze the effect of the above situations on country Z on 3 things. First, general living standard. Second, aggregate output in the short run. 你唔好懶醒同我講 long run 嚇，唔好懶醒同我講 long run 啊。And balance of payment, forget about it. You don't know what is balance of payment yet. 好嘛？ Now, 10 marks or 14 marks. How is it separated? In fact, we do not have an answer. 考評局係唔知㗎，係嘛？ Most likely, that would be around, let's say, if it is 10 marks, so it would be a 444. 呢444加埋唔對喎。Yes, they will give you some buffer marks. 原來有少少 buffer 位俾你走啊。所以你話喂，我有個 point, maybe 1 point I'm not so good at. Let's say general living standard, I'm not exactly too good at. Now, don't worry about it. I'm not exactly too good at this. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Now, here, let's see what we can do. Now, general living standard. Now, this one, you somehow need to link it up back to our GDP chapter. Now, when we talk about the limitations, okay, here, it's a big hint. Government spending taking up 10% into 20% on national defense. Okay? 國防去咗 So, what would happen? Okay? With more spending on weapons, let's say. So what would happen to your basic, let's say, welfare? For example, medical, education, or infrastructure. 你知係串錯字啊呢度，係 infrastructure. Yes, you know how it's spelled, right? 唔寫啦 infrastructure, right? So what would happen to all this money? Now, most likely, these things would decrease with less spending on medical, education, infrastructure, etc. What would that mean? it would mean that our living standard would most likely decrease. Most likely it would decrease, right? Because the proportion of money, so less proportion will be spent on all these. The attention is not on all these things that as a citizen, we care about. The welfare, I should use the word, the social welfare becomes worse, not happy, right? Not happy. Okay, this can be one point. Now, what about aggregate output in the short run? Now, you may say, right, aggregate output in the short run. Now, you can catch on this sentence. Males also required to join the military force. So, when they go to the military force, it means that there will be less labor available for other essential jobs. Essential productions. It may mean SRAS would go down. It may mean SRAS would go down. Yes, all right. But on the other hand, you see, they are increasing the expenses. But remember, this is the proportion, 10 to 12. So we are not sure whether AD would go up or not. We are not exactly sure, but we can argue that because joining military, especially these young, this age should be the most productive. Should be the most productive here because of productivity goes down in the economy, right? Now, are these the only answer? No, these are only examples of answer. But again, I think you're still too green to answer this question as of now. So let's leave it for Form 6 when we actually do the paper one by one. 好嘛？我覺得你暫時仲係比較後生啊，答到呢條啊，好嘛？ Alright, so let's move on to the final questions that we have prepared for this chapter 2019. Okay, 好嘛？ Now here is the individual tax in China progressive, proportional, or regressive? I think already you can see, right? Average tax rate going up. Obviously, this is progressive because average tax rate is going up with income. Same direction. The higher the income, the higher the average tax rate. Now, B, suppose there is a deflationary gap in China economy with the ADAS. Explain how the above individual, the change would affect the deflationary gap in the short run. Short run there. Now, you need to learn how to read this kind of table. Now, remember, the easiest way, 我成日都話最容易嘅方法啦。Look at the bracket and pick a middle number, somewhere in the middle. For example, here, 1500, 13. So let's pick a number of 2250. So under the old system, 2250, how much tax rate you need to pay? You actually need to pay 2%, and the rest of the money, since you are over 1,500, you also need to pay 10%. As opposed to the new system, since you're under 3,000, you just need to pay 3%. That would mean a decrease in tax rate. Therefore, let's write clearly. Part B. We know right now tax rate has decreased. Therefore, our disposable income would go up. AD would go up. Okay? Disposable income go up. AD would go up. Also, you may also argue, since income tax decreased, the incentive to work would go up. Therefore, SRAS would also go up. These two combining, what does that mean? These two combining, it means that Y must go up. Since we were having a deflationary gap, right? Originally, we had deflationary gap, which means Y smaller than YF. Therefore, it will become narrower. 會窄咗啊，係咪？應該會窄咗啊。Now, let's see the diagram. In fact, rather easy diagram. Here, remember price level, and we have output. This is our original AD1. This is our original SRAS1. Originally, Y1 here. Remember, we are showing a deflationary gap. So you also need to draw our LRAS. Now what happened? We have just discussed that AD would go up and SRAS may also go up. Now the new point here, Y2. So let's compare that. This part is the original deflationary gap. Now this part is the new deflationary gap, DG2. Definitely much smaller, so the gap will be narrowed. 好嘛？嗱呢個嗱 ATAS 嗰課講咗好多次啦。嗱 finally the final part for this video and for this chapter. Okay, now to achieve the same effect on the deflationary gap in part B, mainly to close it, and economists suggest the government should lower the required reserve ratio of banks instead of implementing the above change in the tax rate. Now, for and against. Now, first of all, let's do some brainstorming. Lowered. What does that mean? Being lowered. It means money supply would go up. Therefore, AD go up. Price level goes up and output level goes up. So the deflationary gap will be closed. Right? Now, for and against. Again, our four objectives. 係啦，我哋最後一題又見到佢啦。The four objectives. First, long-term growth. Second, price level. Third, when we talk about employment. And finally, income gap. Income gap. Right? 好嘛，嗱睇住 here. In terms of long-term growth, remember just now we say the previous one, the previous one. Here, we talk about incentive effects. Also may affect long run. Now, RRR would have no effect on LRAS. Now, therefore, YF would be constant, which means compared to the original strategy, policy, right? Original policy, we may affect the so-called LRAS, right? 係咪？因為佢問 short run 啫，所以我冇話 long run 啫，係嘛？ May affect the long run AS, right? So let's see. Here, this is actually a negative because it cannot bring about any positive effect on the long-term growth, right? Against. Now, what about 4? Now, let's see 4. Which one we can talk about? Now, let's do income gap. Now, price level 容唔容易講啦？ Not easy because price level goes up, price level goes up. So, let's forget about it. Not easy. What about employment? Y goes up. Also, Y goes up. Not easy as well. What about income gap this time? 好啦，記住啦。Previously, we just mentioned this is a progressive tax. Now, progressive tax being lowered, right? Progressive tax being lowered, meaning, 記唔記得？ progressive 如果低咗 actually it would become wider income gap. Now, by only touching out, not this guy, we do not face this problem. We would not make it wider. 係咪？因為我 out 高咗，我唔會影響咗 gap 㗎。There is no effect, so to speak. 係咪？ No direct effect, so to speak, on the so-called income gap, right? As opposed to the previous one, when you reduce the tax of a progressive tax. 係咪？ So this is positive point and negative point, right? So that's it. We have wrapped up this very long, very difficult, very important chapter. Now, I know this is a very, very long video, right? And I apologize for not making it any shorter. Now, I promise you, I of course, 係咪？你都睇到咁後啦 but in WhatsApp, okay, I will explain. There will be timestamp. So you can refer to the part that you want to refer to, okay? So good luck to your examination. And remember, chapter 22, it should be the core topic you study for your DSC. All right, so until then, see you in the next video. Bye-bye.